Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. Thank you all for being here. This was a topic I hinted at in yesterday's video and asked if you guys would be interested in me doing a deeper dive. So that's what I did all last night and all today. And hopefully, yeah, video is working. I think, let me see. Testing 1, 2, 3. All last night. Yep, because I'm on my own. Got to make sure stuff is working. And this is not just about Ethereum. This is about decentralization and how we measure it. Why it's important, because last week was a lot of talk about people blowing up, people talking about crypto and the fear of regulation, and then people who are pro-regulation, and all these factions are coming together. But I just want to stress, the very last slide I'll talk about today is why we are in this together. So let's jump in and talk about the story. Again, it's not an Ethereum story. That's just one of the components. But we'll see where it goes. And of course, not financial advice. Also, to pull this together requires going to many different sources, and many of these numbers are in flux. So what you see today may be different tomorrow, and vice versa. So the story is literally, it was a crazy week. We had weird stuff going on. As I mentioned, factions blowing up, people throwing words at other people. Then there's a lot of censorship around things like OFAC regulation. If you say that wrong, it could come out bad. And a whole bunch more. But the reason this is important is because we are in crypto for a reason. And there's a lot of talk about whether crypto is a security or not. A lot of talk about how after the proof of stake merge, Ethereum could technically be a security in the eyes of the regulators. We'll talk about that too. But again, this is a story that will not have very specific conclusions because there's so many open-ended questions, but stuff we need to be very, very aware of. And I'm also very aware of the political nature of saying things like what I'm going to say on the internet. So again, it's just data. I try to plumb as much data into every conclusion that I make as possible. And I'm objective. Please do your own research. I'm here to share what I know and what I see. So first of all, this was the big one that triggered a lot of this thought over the last week or so, is Ethereum censorship resistance. No, it is not. So basically, apparently, there's a long story behind this, but a huge frenzy in crypto over things like flashbots censoring Ethereum. And here's the complaint broken down. There are lots of validators that run flashbots, about 60%, and they use MEV boost software. And most of these MEV boost software, to the tune of 80%, run through flashbots relay, which excludes Tornado Cash transactions. And you all heard about Tornado Cash and how that really caused a lot of problems, because I think more than half right now, 52% of the blocks being built in Ethereum are currently OFAC compliant. And that is kind of against the cold thesis and what crypto is all about, as it's supposed to be truly decentralized. And Ethereum is one of the most decentralized chains. That's one of the things that triggered a lot of this. The second one is obviously how people kind of are upset with Ethereum and Tornado Cash censorship. So you can see here, is Ethereum getting censored? The answer is sort of, but not really. And it's like everything in regulation and law, it's tricky. So yes, some validators are excluding Tornado Cash transactions by virtue of using some MEV boost, but not every validator is running these MEV boost relays, which means there are other validators that are still building on non-censoring blocks as per normal. And there are also various other non-censoring relayers offered by other type of routes and manifolds, stuff I don't quite understand how all this stuff is set up, but they are not censoring Tornado Cash transactions, and Ethereum validators are free to connect to them. This means that non-OFAC compliant blocks, i.e. Tornado Cash transactions, are still making their way onto Ethereum. And this is a form of kind of inclusion level censorship. And again, that's why it's kind of like is it being censored? Kind of, sort of, I don't know. But the big question is where is Ethereum headed? And if the validators are faced with the question, hey, do I really want to upset, if I'm in the US now, do I really want to upset OFAC? I will never build another block if there's a Tornado transaction in it. So over time, I believe that 52% will go higher. But where is that going to take us? So let's talk about whether or not regulation is good or bad for crypto. And I know everybody will say, no, regulation is bad. We want the government out of crypto. I get that. Okay, I get that. But this is kind of a quick and dirty summary of what I believe regulation is good and why it's bad for crypto. First of all, the bad is they could kill it, they could break it, or make it impossible to survive or operate, or death by 1,000 cuts, so it'd shrivel up and die over time. The good news is it will make it a safer place, especially with all we've seen in 2022, with all the scammers and dishonest people in the space. Also, it could drive adoption of the asset class, which brings more money into the asset class, and regulation will mean large sums will be allocated, and that means NGU, which means number go up, and we like that. So let's talk about another element that kind of triggered a lot of this discussion. This was posted yesterday, and this is why all this stuff is kind of colliding. Sometimes you can make up a tapestry, but you get the pieces trickle in over 7 to 10 days, and then you have the story, and that's exactly what this was. This was the straw that broke my back and made me question, what is going on here? And Sam Bankman-Fried said yesterday he will delist crypto assets in the US, that means on FTX.us, that it deems it might be securities, according to CEO Sam Bankman-Fried. He does not want to be on the wrong side of the regulators. He also said things to the word effect of, our legal team will do an analysis of the asset according to the Howey test and other relevant case law and guidance. And if that analysis finds it to be a security, we will treat it as such. Basically, kill it from his shelves, so they may not have that much to sell on their shelves from FTX US. So the question is, what do you do now if you're an investor? Imagine you own a token and that could be delisted on FTX and that's the only brokerage you use. I don't know. You go somewhere else, you go to Coinbase that sell everything, all the crap under this sun. We'll see, but this is why this is important to know. This is why, actually, back in March 2021, just after I started this channel, we built what we call the Crypto Compendium, because I was very concerned about regulatory risk and things like centralization, etc., etc. And that's what that machinery does. And that helped us identify winning names and also helped us identify losing names very early. So that's kind of where we are. So the importance of regulation, I know it's tedious and boring, but it's very important we know this. So let's go a little bit deeper. And we're going to talk about one very important thing. This is the Nakamoto coefficient. Simple definition per Balaji Srinivasan, who's one of the top authorities in the whole space of crypto. He says the Nakamoto coefficient is a way to quantify the decentralization of a blockchain or other decentralized system. It's the number of entities you need to compromise at least one essential subsystem of that blockchain. So that is the theory. And there's a lot that goes on behind the Nakamoto coefficient, but we'll talk more about why it's important to know. Now, another fellow who we all know, Gary Gensler, we hear about Grayscale not being approved, etc., and everybody goes, boo! But Gary is a big believer in Nakamoto, in Bitcoin. He believes the innovation is real. He does believe in decentralization. So that's another good thing. So maybe, perhaps, I'm just guessing here, I could be wrong, but the fact that a blockchain could be heavily decentralized could mean it would get less scrutiny from the SEC as a security and other regulators around the world as well, which you talk a bit about Europe in a minute too. So let's talk about what is decentralization. Basically, a good Nakamoto coefficient is a high level of decentralization, and it solves nearly everything. And that's the key thing here. And everybody knows about how important this is. In fact, this is a tweet from Vitalik Buterin, and he talks about how proud he was as their Nakamoto coefficient went up from 25 to 34. Again, this actual post is old, and what's also important to know, it changes very radically with the move from proof of work to proof of stake. So let's talk about that right now. Let's look about the problem that Ethereum has. And the Ethereum, I'm just shining the spotlight on because it makes a good point for other chains out there. So there's over 4.4 million Ethereum deposited through Lido, and they have a huge amount of stake. You got this big purpley group as well. No, Lido have 4.1, the unknown group 4.4, etc. Kraken 1.1, Coinbase 1.04. But you just take into account two of those groups, and you have way more than 50%. And this is a problem. This is the concentration of stakers in these big, huge groups, which is a red flag. And again, this could bring about big problems. For example, if two of them collude, get together, they could change the whole protocol going forward. And this is why it's very important to look at this coefficient. So what we've done here, what we've been doing for a very long time anyway, but we've brushed up all the numbers. Again, just to zoom out, because the internet can be quite forgiving. Some places we had to go to 5 different sources to get one number. We pulled an average of all, okay? Again, and these numbers change all the time. So this is kind of a rough guide as to where we are. So what this is a list of all the validators for all the chains. So we've got Bitcoin in there, first of all. We have all the validators in Ethereum, 448,000. Now, there can be 448,000. It's very hard to decipher how many actually drive consensus within the chain. Very important. For example, Solana has 3,400 validators, but only about 2,074 actually drive consensus. So we look at the 2,074 for Ethereum. I couldn't prize that out, so I just put in the big number. You have L1 there, 3,200, Cardano, 2,949, etc. All the way down the list. Tron has a huge amount too, nearly 5,000 validators, which is good. But what we also added is the Nakamoto coefficient. You can see here, Bitcoin has a Nakamoto coefficient of 7,349. Basically, there are people with nodes in their basement and they are part of the community. And that is much harder to do for other certain chains. But this is definitely the most decentralized chain by far, by light years. Next up, you see Ethereum has a Nakamoto coefficient of 34. Again, that could be most probably a lot lower. We saw Cardano go from about 28 to 22 in a very short window of time because about 400 pools came offline and they've got much bigger concentration and much larger staking pools. Solana's 31, Avalanche 28, Polkadot 16, etc. And you go down to the big names like Binance, only 7, Near 7, Phantom 3, Polygon 3. That is kind of a scary thing. I'm a big Matic fan, but when you look at that actual number, it is very, very low. So it's something that they probably need to fix because obviously that is not decentralized by no stretch of the imagination. Then we also have is the launch date of the chains. This is very important. Some chains have been around for a long time. Ethereum is around nearly 8 years. And if you can calculate the number of validators added per day, it's about 169, which is huge. Next up is 3.8 from L1's a day added, 2.66 for Solana, 3.11 for Tron, etc. Some just don't add any at all. They're just stagnant and will stay at 3 or 7 for whatever. But that is kind of just a quick and dirty summary of what we look at. Now let's jump into looking at the validators count, etc. This is a log chart. Otherwise, the Ethereum one would skew it off. But you can see here, you've got the top 4, Ethereum, L1, Cardano, and Solana. Then Algorand, Avalanche, Tezos, down the line, Polkadot. All we go down. But the thing that I was trying to figure out was, is there a correlation between the number of validators and the Nakamoto coefficient that we saw before? And let's have a look. So first of all, these are the Nakamoto coefficients for the top layer ones, and it's different to the number of validators for the top layer ones. And trust me, there's a reason to all this analysis, and I'll talk about that towards the end in the conclusion. But you can see here, barring Bitcoin, because we're really just looking at layer ones, Ethereum is number 1, and Solana is number 2. Avalanche number 3, Cardano is number 4. So it's different compared to the number of validators. But let's have a look and see if there is a correlation between the Nakamoto coefficient and the number of validators. And there is, but they do not drive each other. There is a correlation, but it's very loose, r squared 0.299, etc. So for some, in some cases, yes. In others, no, there's not. Now, the big question is, why are certain chains making huge investments to decentralize their chain as much as possible? And I'm well aware that this next one has had outages and everything else, but it is stunning to see how much the Nakamoto coefficient has grown just in less than 2 years. It is up and to the right. So this is part of what I'm thinking, and I'm always trying to figure out why all the major players are moving pieces around the chessboard. And it's no secret Sam Bankman-Fried is behind, has a very close relationship with Solana and the Solana team. But maybe Sam Bankman-Fried is also working very closely with the people in Washington, D.C. and regulators all around the world. Maybe, could be wrong. We'll find out next year. But maybe there will be a correlation between things like the Nakamoto coefficient for the level of decentralization and how crypto tokens are actually regulated under securities law going forward. This could be very, very important. Again, stunning graphic here just to share. Now, another thing as well that's very important, and this comes about because a lot of people are confused. It's like, oh, the staking rewards suck for this chain, but they're 25% for this other chain. Let's look at some very important data here. And this is a slide I grabbed from, it was from the near week. Again, it is slightly out of date, but I just want to share this to point out a key number. And as you know, I am fixated on inflation. It's one of my top 10 things I look at for when I analyze a crypto. It ties into tokenomics. And think of Bank of America giving you 0.01% on your cash deposits in your bank account, but they charge you 29.99% on your credit card. True story. That's what happens. Well, staking rewards can be kind of similar. They pull from treasury, inflation to pay staking APY. The customers, like the Hex customers and everything else, they're very happy with their 48%, but they don't understand what's happening behind the scenes. And this is why you have to be fixated on this. And this chart shows brilliantly the importance of what is called net inflation, the red little bar. So yield is not net of token inflation. Usually the nominal figure is presented. If staking yield equals token inflation, the real yield is 0%. In that case, staking allows you to avoid dilution, which I hate. That's why I don't like fiat, and maintain a fixed percentage of the network. And this, again, this data could be off, but the point is, remember, if you're earning, say, 10%, but the crypto is inflating at 20% or 26%, you're not doing well. It's a trick. It's a smoke and mirrors. So just be very careful of that. And the reason I stress this, because I know this guy looks at that stuff and he understands the game behind the scenes, and he ain't no dummy. And post proof of stake merge, Gary Gensler said there is a process known as proof of stake in which coin holders can earn financial rewards by allowing a network to use some of their assets. And this will fall under security scrutiny and security rules. And crypto firms are they want to avoid that security label because it carries things like investor protection requirements, which are extremely hard to fulfill, and many say are absolutely incompatible with the asset class. And basically, Gary says there has to be a full disclosure obligation. And for that to be done by a huge chain like Ethereum, that's possible. But for smaller chains, it is absolutely onerous and would push them out. So let's talk about the conclusion and why we're trying to patch all of this together. As I may think like I'm bouncing around like a ping pong, but trust me, I'm not. So this is the short list of unanswered questions so far. First of all, the Nakamoto coefficient appears to be the best quant indicator for measure of decentralization for a blockchain. And if that's true, we just saw how high some of the top names are. Now, censorship exists even for Ethereum. And yes, I'm also very aware that chains can be reset, but they do have to build consensus with the validators to do that first as well. And that's why it takes time to do. You can't just flick a switch and be 5 minutes. You can if you're Binance, and we saw that happen as well 2 weeks ago. Separate story. Now, will regulators see it as such? That's the big question. I don't know if they will take something like the Nakamoto coefficient to identify if something is a security or not, or sufficiently decentralized to escape certain type of regulations and rules. We'll see. Will regulators weave it into the Howey test? I don't know. That Howey test is as old as the hills, and it's been around for a long time. This crypto world is very different. And the final question, will Sam Bankman-Fried delist all tokens FTX deemed securities? And if so, what would be left on their shelves? I would not imagine very much based on this little analysis. Now, switching gears, a lot of talk about Sam Bankman-Fried. So this is one thing that's kind of unusual. And for our European fans out there who use FTX, it just came obvious to me to a Patreon community member known as Marek MTR. Big thank you. Marek is a regulations lawyer in Europe and has pointed out this thing called EU Spot Plus on FTX. And the whole idea here is why structure it this way? So Spot Plus is a kind of a derivative of Bitcoin and therefore a financial instrument under EU law. There's a thing called MIFID2, and he knows all about this stuff way more than I do. But the point is, what's going on here? A derivative referencing crypto is currently not a financial instrument under EU law, and therefore, where is all this going to go? I don't know. But remember also, Spot Plus is not real Bitcoin. You can't download it to your wallet. It is a derivative of Bitcoin. It's a tracker. And Sam Bankman-Fried understands that crypto needs to be regulated to be widely adopted. And it looks like maybe he will do anything to make sure it fits into any existing regulatory framework that exists around the world. And that is one thing that we need to be very aware of. It's kind of like shoehorning in a new derivative of an asset to comply with existing regulations in an existing jurisdiction. This is where it gets really tricky. So the question you all ask, because I read stuff out there and a lot of you think, oh, Sam, he's evil, he's bad, etc. And some people think he's good. So let's have a look. So is Sam Bankman-Fried good or bad for crypto? On the bad side, some call him the JP Morgan of crypto. He's in tight with regulators. He goes against the grain of the crypto ethos. He has some strange items, for example, the European law we just discussed here as well. But the good, he has pledged to give away all his wealth. So he's not your typical Wall Street bankster, in my opinion. He lives a very humble life, drives a 10-year-old Camry, wears New Balance sneakers, and he believes crypto can make the world a better place. In fact, to prove that, he has a billboard that says it. I'm in on crypto to make a global impact for good. So we'll see. I tend to see the best in people, but we could all get tricked and scammed, and I hope this is not the case. It's already happened once too many times in my life. In fact, once, and we don't need to talk about that case. So let's talk about this one. Sam Bankman-Fried as well said only 2 months ago that Solana was the most underrated token, and today it could be trying to kill it if he delists it if it's deemed a security. So this is kind of what keeps me awake at night. Obviously, Solana's my third biggest position, but no more than 6 or 8% of my total crypto, okay? In full disclosure. Then I have Ethereum, and then I have mostly Bitcoin. But I think this could be the reason that the Solana blockchain is working so hard to drive up that Nakamoto coefficient so rapidly and to become much more decentralized. So we'll see. But final little note, this one, reminder, the big idea of crypto, the reason we are in this is not to become part of the traditional financial system, but to deal with the problem of debasement of fiat currency. We need an alternative. That's why I am obsessed with this category. And nobody puts it better than David Sachs. He said, if we all believe in it, it will come true. That's why he owns Bitcoin. He believes in it. And yes, he's a VC, and I can hear boos in the audience, but David Sachs is a very smart guy. He says it is the antidote to inflation and money printing. And again, no government can control crypto. That's why the Nakamoto coefficient is so important, and it gives us true separation of money and state. But the question is, are we talking about Bitcoin? Bitcoin is sufficiently decentralized, but will the others get there? And which ones will they be? That's why we look at these numbers. And that's why I just want to share this one chart one last time. Why this chart is so important, everybody. Take a screenshot and look at this as you make your non-financial advice investment decisions. But that's why, again, we built the compendium way back early last year because it's critical to know this stuff. And I'm just trying to figure out how all the players work together. What is Vitalik doing? What are the nodes doing on the Ethereum network? How are they working with OFAC? What are the validators going to do? What's Sam doing with regulators? What's Sam planning for crypto? He's also behind things like Aptos that just launched, which I don't believe in. To be honest, I haven't seen enough to make any investment, and I think all the money has been taken. So forget that one for now. And what's Gary Gensler thinking? What are the European regulators thinking? What's going to happen with the new European regulation that's coming out, the MiCA, in early 2023? How is that going to impact all of this? What's going to happen in the rest of the world? So it's very, very important, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, to keep an eye on regulation. Sorry for being longer. Saturday morning is supposed to be a fast one, but this was 30 minutes. But it's so important. So Hope you like it. A lot of work went into this. No sleep last night, but thank you for the support. See you all soon. Bye all. I gotta